So I wanted to just sort of talk about how we got here as far as accessibility goes, because even before we bought Adobe and Phonegap, we had some projects that were using it, and so my first exposure to it was to walk up to a team that had put a booth together that was showing off this app that they had done, and the first thing that I did was to turn VoiceOver, the screen reader, on the iPad. And then just sort of swipe around and see what I could do. And all of a sudden, all the engineers' eyes went. Like it was the first time that they had been exposed to that kind of environment. Like, what if you couldn't see the screen? And the story for mobile accessibility is pretty good because we build around all of these web views. And the web view is kind of the most complex object that we've got. In an entire mobile operating system. It has the most attention paid to it. It has the most components. All those things have to work. It works in a linear order. The DOM gives you the information that you need. So all of that stuff really makes sense for making that stuff accessible more than the normal mobile SDKs do. So I'm going to give you the little elevator pitch about accessibility, and then I usually sometimes ask questions about like how many people have heard a screen reader, or how many do testing and things like that. But I'm going to explain the whole thing to you in about 15 minutes. And if I'm below your level, I apologize again. So the questions about this are about like why should I care about accessibility? And the reason that we come from this perspective in a lot of cases is that we have we tend to skew younger. Our eyes haven't gone bad on us yet. We don't necessarily immediately have a disability where we are actually having trouble using this technology. But one thing that I learned at the end of in recent times, I had a bunch of family come and visit, and noticed that pretty much everybody that's over the age of 50 in my family has an Android phablet. And the reason that you have these 5.5, 6-inch devices now is that people are straining to see this stuff. They're not going to consider themselves to have a disability, but that feature is now coming down to our level. So we can make an argument that, well, if you're designing something for a government application, then you need to do something for Section 508, or that if you are that if you're building an application for somebody who's elderly, or for a group that deals with disability, that's one thing. But we're actually designing for ourselves. When we turn 50, 60, 70 years old, these applications are going to be the things that we expect to have. And we're going to have things like our bank accounts and our retirement funds and our access to public services. We're going to be paying our taxes with these devices. We're going to be voting with these devices. And we are going to be supremely pissed off if the people who are in our position today are not paying attention to the needs that we have in the future. So that's why accessibility matters to you in a personal way as we're designing this. So I'm going to jump into the demo application for this, which I have here. One of these tools that we built was actually for the CSUN Conference on Technology and People with Disabilities earlier this year. So we took we screen scraped the entire conference agenda and put it into this application. And this is just a standard Phonegap application. We did no modification, tweaking, or any of that, and it's here up on screen. So I will load this application. We have this neat little paging interface that loads it up. We can move back and forth between the days up here. So all of these components are basically based in HTML in some form or another. So there's nothing really magical about the way that we put this together. But now I'm going to turn the VoiceOver screen reader on.
CS8. List start.
So it knows that we have a list here. So I can navigate through this interface. I'm going to turn this down a little, and we can make all of the content of this is
AM. N-8 AM. Supporting AAC through education, therapy materials and progress monitoring. Heading level 2. Link.
So just by navigating through this interface, we have all of the semantics being read out to the user. And this is going to look and feel like an HTML page. Like we already heard that this is a heading level 2. We know that this is a link, so I can double tap anywhere on the screen. And it's going to take me into
session, heading level 1.
To the information for that content. Now, I can move through this sequentially. I can drag my finger around the screen.
Navigation, back, AM. Supporting AAC through although hardware and software are ever changing. Presented by, heading level 4.
So people can find the information that they're looking for. We can also scroll with 2 fingers up.
Back, button, landmark, session, start, checkbox, unchecked, love, checkbox, unchecked. Thursday, March 20th, 8 a.m. to 8:50 a.m. supporting.
So we're able to now find sequentially through the context of this document everything that a sighted user can see. They can interact with all of the things that a sighted user can interact with. And so now we have this interface where we haven't done anything Herculean to make this stuff work, but we are we're designing what is basically looks and feels like a web application to every user that's available there. So that's that's demo number 1. Now, the way that this works is that, like I said, we're using the web view that each operating system supports, and in this version, we actually have a plugin that is now supporting iOS and Android, which means also we get some support for Fire OS as part of the deal, but all of these things, especially now that you've got Android Lollipop that has, where we're talking about the Chrome web view and things like that, we get a lot more of the expressivity that you can get in accessibility. So from basic HTML accessibility support, which has to do with just semantics and adding alt text to images and things like that. The same rules apply for doing something in Phonegap now. We have support for ARIA, and that depends from platform to platform. So if you want to create landmarks for being able to tap on certain links to be able to find where the previous and next page link of Phonegap, because we're not exposing any new components of our own unless we're inserting our own frameworks. And so we can crib all of the support that the web view developers have built into the view. Each web view has a different level of support, so we're starting to do our investigation into Firefox OS, Windows Phone 8, and so on, especially as they add support for screen readers and magnification and high contrast and all of that. So Phonegap accessibility is more or less web accessibility, except for one thing. Now, actually, including one thing. One of the things that we don't get to have on the web is access to whether or not you're using assistive technology, whether you have a screen reader enabled, whether you have a magnifier turned on, whether you're using high contrast mode, which would be useful to us because then we could change the CSS or we could reorder the text or any of those kinds of things. But privacy is an issue, because if you telegraph to somebody that you have a disability, what we have found is that people end up going and putting them off into a text-only website, which never gets updated, never gets the new functionality, and it's not shareable from one person to the next. They're having 2 completely different experiences, and one of them is very degraded. So on the other side, we have the mobile operating system APIs, where we are able to get all of that information, because this device is, this belongs to me and I have this information and I want to be able to have this experience the way that I want it. So what we've done is, because we are using we're using the mobile operating system but with web technology, we needed to have a way to capture that information so that we could make a better experience for users. And so we created Phonegap Mobile Accessibility. This is a plugin. It's already readily available. We have the repository on GitHub. It is blessed for use with Phonegap Build. And it gives you all the APIs that each operating system has that you're not able to ask for on the web. So all of the information about assistive technology status, the event models for turning things on or off, access to directly to the text-to-speech engine, and then we have generic functions to call for is a screen reader running, as well as operating system level functions for on iOS is VoiceOver running, or on Android is TalkBack running. So if you have some discrepancies from one version to another and you need to change some of the markup for one screen reader or another, that's also available to you. So here's the one slide accessibility discussion. The one thing that's really important here is making sure that the reading order of the document is logical. If you are building an application and you're doing it in the style of, oh, let's just throw it up and we can just absolute position everything, it's going to be fine. What you're going to end up having is that the screen reader is going to read that HTML source sequentially. And if you're doing something where you're just throwing things down at the end for dialog boxes, and then just leaving them there because you just mark them, you just hide them off the screen or things like that, you'll have some really weird side effects in the content of your document. So pay attention to that reading order. Make sure that you're not injecting a bunch of junk into the document, and things will turn out a lot better. When you're adding images, and this includes like CSS sprites, you have buttons or things like that. Add alt text to support that content. If it's an image, you just put an alt attribute. There are different techniques for doing different styles of image injection, but having that text is particularly important. Actually, that story that I told earlier about the first team that I worked with, the only thing that didn't really work was that they didn't have alt text for their back button images or things like that. So really simple to do. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it's something that can get hidden because you're designing in this interface and not paying attention to the HTML underneath it. And that sort of falls under the umbrella of using good semantic HTML. If something looks like a heading, even though you can style it however you want in CSS, make it a heading. If it's a list, make it a list. Don't just put bullets next to the content that you're looking for. Because you're stealing away, especially with lists, you will hear how many items are in a list if you're using a screen reader in a mobile operating system. So if you can't find out that there are 100 links that you're going to go through, it's going to be a really long slog for a user that needs to access that information. And if there are things that you can't do semantically because of some constraint, using the ARIA attributes to set roles on things to say this thing is a link or this thing is a button, this thing is a slider, are ways for you to get around that limitation. And then anything that you need over and above that, if you need to be able to change a style sheet or you need to be able to reorder some content, then this Phonegap mobile accessibility module will come in handy. I've got 2 slides to show you all the APIs that you have here. These are all online. You don't need to, or you can take a picture, I guess. But the overview, basically, if you have closed captioning enabled as a setting at the operating system level, we can query for that, so you can turn on closed captioning in the videos that you're putting out in a Phonegap application. You can test to see if the screen reader is running. On Android, like on KitKat and below, there's this function of touch exploration. It used to be you could only move sequentially through an Android application, but you can test for that. Guided access is kind of like the opposite of that. It sets different rectangles that you can't escape with your finger. You can test to see if that's enabled. You can capture different events, like if the accessibility state has changed. If somebody has, I can unplug that. So if any of these states have changed, if somebody has mono audio, if they can only hear through one ear and both channels are going in one ear, colors are inverted, the different state change listeners that are associated. You can actually make the thing speak or stop speaking using the speak function. Posting a notification, so giving people notification in real time, including announcements. Getting the default text zoom, which is now like a part of the core operating systems rather than off in the accessibility section for the reasons I described earlier. Updating it and using the preference that the user has set. And then a handful of different events that bubble up that you can capture to see if the statuses have changed. So by doing this, the benefit that we've got is that we can reach all of these platforms at once, which is something that if you have done native accessibility work, you need to understand everything that is in the OS 10 or iOS or Android or Fire OS, Windows Phone APIs for what's available to you. All of them are different. There's not a lot of overlap in functionality, so we're taking that away. And giving you one platform to develop accessible applications, which is huge. It's really important for people that are developing accessible applications. Easier to develop and modify than native applications. You have more people who know web accessibility than any operating system accessibility. And we are using that native WebView support. So very big improvements for the users, and we're making these things available so that like on day one when you're deploying these applications that you have the accessibility support that you need. So I'm going to have this other application that I can show you that is just showing you all of the features that are available in each platform. So whether the screen reader is running, or to be able to post an announcement so that you can hear how that works. And again, you can use this in PhoneGap build. That's all available to you. Just import the PhoneGap mobile accessibility plugin, and that all of this content is available to you. So that's it. I'm going to leave the link to the GitHub repo and all of the information, the Adobe Accessibility website and blog. I'm Matt May. Michael Jordan is the engineer working on the project, and here are all of the Twitter handles that we have associated. So that's it. Thanks, and I can take a question or two if I have a moment.
Totally. And yeah, the guy's name is actually Michael Jordan. Super true.
He's also that good, so.
Oh, the question is if once you use the screen reader or the.
Well, okay. So the question is that will it, will the web view, so you sort of give away the game that it's a web view, right? Is that the question? And kind of is the answer. The HTML, like web content, has a certain feel to users of screen readers that is different from a mobile OS, and so they won't hear that it's a web page, but the way that they will interact with it, they will hear things like links, which are not a common role in a native application. But they're spending so much of their time in a web browser environment that that's not a negative for them. They have a lot of context that they gain by having that act like a web application. So whereas it might feel like that less native is a bad thing to to a sighted user that's moving around, and you want to avoid that pretty much at all costs while you're developing an application like this. This is actually a benefit to users of screen readers or assistive technology because they know that system really well.
It's a really fascinating thing to watch someone who's blind use an iPhone and navigate it with the same dexterity and speed, in fact probably better than we can use a device.
Yeah. And
they listen to it.
And actually, I've had a conference where we had developers that they got a prize if they could successfully enter their own name into a form, and I would turn off the screen so they couldn't cheat. And it's really difficult, and it makes it feel like it's really difficult for users to do that. But when that's your only way of communicating with an application, you get really good really fast. People can type at 30 plus words a minute with the screen off.
Yeah.
They interact just as quickly as you would expect somebody that's just browsing around the screen for that information.
There's a bunch of questions. Matt, you pick.
Sorry.
You mentioned high contrast.
Yes.
Can you do also something with maps, Google Maps, that you get high contrast?
Oh, high contrast in mapping software. Yeah, I think so. No is the answer.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, actually, like GIS stuff, like you could theoretically do that kind of thing. Like you could have a different topographical map for it and swap that around.
Mapbox.
Yeah.
Mapbox would let you do this. It's called Mapbox.
Yes. Yeah, but depending on the capabilities of the user, that may or may not be beneficial to them.
You could do this. It's possible.
You have a question?
It'll be a bitch, but
Yeah.
it's worth it.
So with regard to accessibility, what are your thoughts on setting the viewport scale? So a web view can't be zoomed in, kind of like a web browser can.
Yeah, setting.
How does that impact kind of like what you're talking about as far as enabling or disabling zoom?
Yeah, setting default viewport, especially on smaller devices, that's a real pain point for users. And I know that iOS has really tried to control that with their dynamic text so that they can resize things. But yeah, it can be a real pain, especially if it's just a web page to set that default viewport and not allow things to be zoomed. So if you can avoid it, that's really important. It's less of an issue on tablets because you'll have at least a little bit more space. But if you're locking things down to like 1/10 of an inch, that's a real problem. So that's one of the things that we just recommend that avoiding. All right, well, I can make room for the next person. Thanks a lot, everybody.